Shvei Pesha V'Yakov Ne'um Adonai. You can move on. Oh. She's not open. V'ata kadosh yoshev tilo Yisrael v'karazel zeh v'amar kadosh 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 Adonai tzva'ot melech haaretz kevodo malkedim. V'tisa'eni ruach v'shma achrei kol ra'ash gadol baruch kavod Adonai mimkomo Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. V'yivdechu v'cha yodeh shemecha ki lo azavta dorshecha Adonai Adonai chafetz l'ma'an tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir. Chati Kaddish is on the bottom of page 217. Please rise. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah ve'alma divra kirtei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon U'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael b'agala b'zman kariv imru amen Yehei shmei rabba mevarach le'olam omei almaya Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei d'kudashah brichu ve'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata V'amiran ve'alma v'imru amen Va'ani tefilati lecha, Adonai et ratzon, Elohim berov chasdecha, aneni bemet yishecha. V'hivin so Aharon, v'yomer Moshe, kumar Adonai ve'afutzu oivecha, ve'anusu mesanecha mipanecha, ki mitzion teitei Torah, u'devar Adonai me'Yerushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah, le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Gadlu Adonai iti, u'neromim Hashemo yachtav, le'echad Adonai hagula, v'agvura v'tiferet v'netzach v'hod, kichol hashamayim u'ba'aretz, l'chad ha'mamlacha, v'nechei l'chol ha'rosh, romimu Adonai Eloheinu, v'yishtachavu l'adam mamlacha v'shuv, romimu Adonai Eloheinu, v'yishtachavu l'har kodasho. You may be seated. Our Torah reading this week, for this upcoming week, comes to us from the Parsha of Ki Tisa, which is found on page here in the Torah, and page 523 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash.
Who's taking?
V'tigale v'tera malchuto aleinu b'zman karov v'chon pleitatenu pleitat mo beit Yisrael echenu chesed rachamim l'ratzon v'nomar amen. Hakol havu godel aleinu tenu kavod l'Torah. Ya'amod.
Michael ben Moshe Fischel.
Michael ben Moshe
Fischel.
Aliyah Rishona Baruch Shenatan Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'Kedushato. V'atem habikim b'Adonai Elohechem chaim kolchem hayom.
Baruch Adonai, Baruch Adonai, Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Baruch L'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai, Baruch L'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chavanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vaydiber Adonai el Moshe lemor Kidisa et Rosh ben Yisrael Likvidehem V'nachnu ish kofer nafsho L'Adonai bivkototam V'lo yiyem pakem neket bivkototam Zezitnu kol over habakodim Makatzin hal-shekel b'shekel ha-kodesh Esrim Geirah HaShekach Matzin HaShekach Turma L'Adonai.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam natav b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen. Yahamod.
Yosef Yaakov,
Yosef Yaakov.
Ben Michael, Rachel Malka.
Ben Michael Rachel Malka. L'Aliyah Sheni.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch L'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach L'Olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Kol over hapagodim ben esrim shana v'mala itain turumat Adonai asher lo yarbeh v'hada lo yamit mechatzin ha'shecha latei turumat Adonai lakaper amnos v'techem v'lachata et kesev hakaperim me'et ben Israel v'data ota al vodat ochel moein v'haya Lifnei Yisrael, Yisakaron, Lifnei Adonai, Lakabara, Nafshotechem.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam natav b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Ya'amod.
Benjamin, Menachem, and Miriam.
Benjamin.
Menachem or
Ben
Miriam?
Nachum Miriam. L'Aliyah Shlishit.
Baruch Adonai and Barak.
Baruch Adonai Baruch L'olam va'ed.
Baruch and Barak L'Olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Melech Haolam. Asher Bachar Ben Mitlamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Adonai Noten HaTorah. V'deber Adonai Moshe lemor v'yasita k'yor nechoshet v'kol nechoshet ratza v'nata oto ben ochel moed uven hamizbeach v'nata shamayim v'rachatzu acharon v'anav v'imenu et yidechem v'red raglechem v'voom el ochel moed yiratzu mayim v'lo yamutu o b'tishtam el hamizbeach l'shared l'chatzir Ishel Adonai, Brakatsu, Yedechem, Vraglechem, Vilayamutu, Vahatalachem, Hot Olam, Lazaraho, Ladoratam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chem natan b'tocheinu Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Namdu. Magvia v'hagolelet v'sefer Torah. We're going to lift and wrap the Sefer Torah. Please rise.
Torah asher sam Moshe livnei bnei Yisrael bi'Adonai bi'ad Moshe. Eitani מחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר. עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר. וכל נתיבותיה שלום, דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום, Hashivenu Hashem, Hashem Elecha, V'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Yeah, like this. So then on this one. You guys this. The yod goes on this side. Sorry. There you go.
Well, before we return the Sefer Torah, I know we have at least one Almali that we're going to say. If there are more after this one, please let me know. Yeah, okay. Almali Rachamim Shochim Bamromim Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Tacha Kanfei Hashchina B'ma'alot Kidoshim Utorim Kizor Rakia Mazhirim L'nishmat Aharon ben Avraham Abba Shehalcho le'olamo B'gan Eden Tei Menuchato Ana Bal Rachamim Hastirei B'Seter Knafecha Le'olamim Utzror B'Tzror Chaim Et Nishmotav Adonaihu Nachlata Yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavotav V'Nomar Amen. Yeah. Do you want to say a word about, is it your father?
Another year since my father passed away in 1995. We went from England, South Europe to South Africa, and he came to America with me. That time I can make it really with them. And lived in San Diego. Sugar and really lovely, wonderful. But just went through the new person. It's a good lunch. Really well lunch. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not ready for a lesson.
Thank you. Yes, grandfather Meyer ben Abraham.
Do you want to hold the Sefer Torah?
Yeah, this has all the different genders in here.
Yeah,
That's why I gave
it's
it
a
to you.
little bit easier. Thank you. I might
What's that?
Ben
Abraham.
El Rachamim Shochim Bamromim Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'ma'alot Kidoshim Utorim Kizor Rakia Mazhirim L'nishmat Meir ben Avraham Shalcha Le'olamo B'gan Eden Tehei Menuchato Ana Bal Rachamim Astireu B'Tzeter Knafecha Le'olamim Utzor B'Tzor Chaim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachlato V'Yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo V'Nomar Amen. Do you want to say a word about your grandfather?
Yes, he came to the U.S. to St. Louis in 1913 from Ukraine, and was and then 10 years later he worked hard, and his wife, my grandmother, and his two oldest children came, and then two more children, including my mother, and he worked hard and was a very gentle and quiet man. He was very loving and to his family.
Yes, my baby for
Thank you.
easy crow. Anyone else who was any other sites coming up in the next week? And we're going to continue with returning the Torah to the Ark, which is found on page 221. There's Yehalelu Shem Adonai, Ki Nizgav Shemo Levado, Hodu al Eretz V'Shamayim, Vayarim Keren Le'amo, Tila L'cho Chasidav, Livnei Yisrael Amkeru Lo Hallelujah, V'David Mizmor. Uvnucho Yomar. Kilach tov natati lachem, Torati al ta'azovu, Eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba, V'tomcha meusha, Dirachecha darchei noam, V'chol nativota shalom, Hashivenu ranai elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh yameinu kekedem. We're going to continue on bottom of page 222 with Chatzi Kaddish, which will be followed by silent Amidah, which will then be followed by a repetition of the Mincha Amidah. Yikadal v'kadash shemei rabbah be'alma divra kirtei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomecho u'chayedecho beit Yisrael b'agala v'zman kariv imru amen yehi shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam ome'omaya Yiparach v'ishtabach v'pa'ar v'trombam v'itnaseh v'tadar v'taleh v'talal shemei dekudesha b'richu le'la min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran be'alma v'imru, Amen. the repetition of if you're still saying your own personal Amidah, please continue. Otherwise, please join us at the beginning of the repetition of the Mincha Amidah, which can be found on page 223. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanara El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Yaakov v'Zocher Chastei Avot Umevi Goel Livnei B'nehem L'ma'an Shemo B'Ahava Melech Chozer Foked U'Moshiach Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ufoked Sarah, Ata Gibor L'Olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim Ata Rav Leoshia, Mashiv Haruach Umarid Hagashem, Mechokel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayei Metim Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Brofech Ulim Atir Asurim, Mechayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Giverot, Umido Melach, Melech Memit Umchayei Matzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman Ata Lachayot Metim, Baruch Ata Adonai, Mechayei HaMetim, Mekadesh Shimcha Ba'olam, Keshem Shmakdishim Oto B'Shmei Maram, Kakatuv Al Yad Nevi'acha, V'Karazel Zevi Amar. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzava'ot, Melech Haaretz Kevodo, Le'umatam Baruch Yomeru. Baruch Kavod Adonai Mimkomo, Divrei Kodshecha Katuv Le'mor. Yimloch Adonai L'olam, Elohayich Zion, L'dor Vador, Hallelujah, L'dor Vador Nagid Godlecha, U'netzach Netzachim Kiddushatcha, Nakdish, V'shivchacha Eloheinu. Mipinu lo yamush le'olam va'ed, ki al melech gadol v'kadosh ata, baruch ata Adonai, ha'el ha'kadosh. Ata echad u'shmecha echad, u'mikamecha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz, tiferet kedula, ve'eteret Yeshua, yom menucha u'kedusha le'amcha natata, Avraham yagel, Yitzchak yiranen, Yaakov v'vanav yanuchu vo, menuchat avan u'nedava, menuchat emet ve'emunah, Menuchat shalom v'shalva v'ashket v'vetach, menuchat shlema she'ata rotzeh ba, yakiru vanecha v'yedu ki mincha hi menuchatam, ve'al menuchatam yakdishu et shemecha, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, ritzei menuchatenu, kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'ten chelkenu b'toratecha, sabenu mituvecha, v'samchenu b'shuatecha, v'taher libenu l'avdecha be'emet, v'anchilenu Adonai Eloheinu, be'ava v'ratzon shabbat kodshecha, v'yanuchu v'Yisrael, mekadeshei shemecha, baruch ata Adonai, mekadesh ha'shabbat. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, b'amcha Yisrael tfilatam, v'ashev et ha'avodah lidvir veitecha, u'tfilatam be'ava tikabal ratzon, u'tihi ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha, v'techazena einenu, b'shucha l'tzion b'rachamim, baruch ata Adonai, ha'machazir shechinato l'tzion, modim anachnu lach. Hatov kilo chalu rachamecha, v'hamirachem kilo tamu chasadecha me'olam kivinu lach, v'al kulam yitbarach v'yitramam shimcham al kenu tamid le'olam va'ed, v'kol chaim yoducha sela, v'alu et shimcha be'emet ha'el yeshurateinu v'ezrateinu sela, baruch ata Adonai, hatov shimcha lacha na'el lehodo, shalom rav al Yisraelcha, v'al Kol yoshvei tevel tasim le'olam, ki atahu melech adon lechol ha'shalom v'tov beinecha. Levarach et amcha Yisrael b'chol eit v'chol sha'a b'shlomecha. Baruch ata Adonai, hamevarach et amo Yisrael b'shalom. We're on the top of page 230. Tzidkacha tzedek le'olam, v'toratcha emet, v'tzidkacha Elohim, ad marom asher atzita gedolot, Elohim mi chamocha, tzidkacha kehararei el, mishpatecha tahom rava, adamu ve'ema, toshia Adonai. Ikadavi Kadashme Rabba Be'alma Divra Kirte Ve'amlich Malchute B'chayachonu V'yamechonu Chaydecho Be'Yisrael Bagalav Yizman Karivi Meru Amen Yehi Shme Rabba Mevorach Le'olam U'Amel Maya Yiparach Yishabach V'Pa'ar V'Troma V'Naseh V'Tadar V'Taleh V'Talal Shmei Dekudasha B'Yechu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata Tush B'Chata V'Nechemata Da'amiran Be'alma V'imeru Amen Tikabal Sloton V'Oton Dechol Yisrael Kadama V'Hun V'Shmaya V'imeru Amen Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shmaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'imeru Amen Oseh Shalom B'Mromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'imeru Amen. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, v'tekru la'leotze bereishit, shelo asade kegoye haratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Can you have us? Kakatu b'toratecha Adonai yimloch olam va'ed v'ne'emar v'chaya Adonai lemelech al kol ha'aretz bayom ha'u yeh Adonai echad Ushemo Echad. Kadisha Tome Mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 232. Yit David Kadash Shemei Rabbah Be'alma Divra Kirute V'amlich Malchute B'chayechon V'yomechon U'chayedecho Beit Yisrael Ba'agala U'bizman Kari V'imru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam U'amei Almaya Yiparach V'yishtabach V'yipa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shmei Dekudashah B'richu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tush B'chata V'nechemata Da'amiran Be'alma V'imru Amen Yehi Shlam Araba Min Shmaya V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen Oseh Shalom B'imromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Shalom, everyone. There is a lovely spread over there. Please help yourself to some food, and we'll do some learning over Suda Shlishit in a few minutes once everyone has food.
So they're good bagels? No, the gluten-free. What? The gluten-free bagels. The bagels you want to get them?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was one, right? Yeah. They're solid. Yeah. They're basic.
Yeah.
Gluten-free cupcake. And they did seitan yolk, which was the first time along that had seitan yolk. That was the
Yeah.
but that was the first
So like
one.
news. There's I have not there's a gluten-free bakery in Culver City.
They just moved, they just opened, no, it was in the west valley, they just opened up a new place.
Yeah,
That's
we were
yeah.
talking about.
And their stuff is good. because
Modern
they
bread and
want
bagel. It was a line out the door on a Sunday afternoon.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And worth it.
So far.
I mean,
I mean, you got out of the house.
Yeah, it was totally worth it. There's no place to sit though. Alright. They have like a little alley of seating outside. The one in Santa Monica. The one in the valley, but it's what? It's on Montana. I don't remember what the
One of the valley must have places to sit because the valley has space.
Right.
Such is the nature of the valley.
No, if you want to go there to sit, go to the store in the valley. But if you just want like hello things like that, bagels.
Pastries are good too.
Yeah, everything there is really good.
I would have to
More,
but I've actually.
Yeah.
Panga, it's in the Panga Plaza. Panga, but their bagels are good.
I like I wrote about it in this week's season.
Oh, so.
That's what I was.
Yeah, I didn't just bring it up from
No,
notes.
it wasn't in the Jew. It was in the newsletter for Shabbat. Yeah. That's why Michael was bringing it up. Yeah.
Because when it says by Ben Siegel.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
It's
Don't flatter me.
what? Yeah. I don't know if I can't remember if I've seen you or at least about it online. So I'm so very excited for no.
Oh,
I mean, yes. It's so exciting. I mean, our loss. The DC metro area is game. I say Virginia, I feel like I say the DC area.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good.
I can't have him. We have too many letters.
You know, like this is what it means to be from mixed heritage, right? Understand that this is a thing in the world, and who knows? The Nationals may be good again at the time. On the other side. I mean, of course, have you been ever?
Yeah, like for
It's a beautiful park.
yeah.
Oh, they have like a significant.
I know.
Yeah,
It was closed because it was coming out of COVID. They hadn't yet reopened.
So I was there this summer and I had a lovely barbecue brisket and something. Yogi back in her brings that. This is good. Yeah.
I mean, the last time I had it,
Yeah.
like my friends in Israel.
That's awesome.
It's a butcher shop in Spokane. I think they're in Spokane. They're like just outside of Chicago.
Oh, okay, I've never been that. No one ever heard of it.
Yeah. Yes.
The Jets of the
June, July, something.
July 15th.
So do you have time in between work and show? Like, when you go home from, I don't know, home.
So this is
West Vermont.
This is the conversation that's not. It's good to have that. We're in a month.
Yeah.
And we haven't
So
current conversation.
I love that your parents.
The current conversation.
It should definitely be born. When's graduation?
Middle May 20th.
Very excited.
Couple comments. I could hear they're talking. I don't know what the right way to do it when they're talking about.
Yeah, right. No.
Forget about Zoom, I can't even hear.
Oh, okay.
I have 19, 20 people. That's totally fine.
That'll pass on. I know they always, it's a back and forth
No,
because
it's totally, this is the right answer, I just wanted to let.
no, that I will pass on.
Get that right. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that I will pass
I
on.
will
It's
never be
always-
the right amount.
Yeah, there's always too much or too little. But I would be more comfortable with there being too much. Thank you for letting me know. Can you just, not necessarily the whole list, but can you remind me on the way out to send an email to Rhonda and I'll send it? What?
Jeff has a booth at Dodger Stadium. You know about that?
I've never been.
Take like 1 more minute just to grab food, grab drinks, sit down. I passed out, there should be like piles of the source sheets for this week. And we'll get started in a minute.
I'm gonna read it up to look at the source.
I'm guilty of that too.
I can hear myself saying, please resist the urge to turn to the back of it. Down in front of me, I'm like, teachers in the work.
Oh, for sure. I do it all the time too.
Do you want food or drink before you start teaching? Just so you realize how complicated.
I have my water.
Fair enough.
All right, we are in the sake of, or in the interest of time and making sure that everyone gets out of here as quickly after Havdalah as possible, because we're right on the edge of being able to actually do things. Motzei Shabbos, a couple more weeks and Shabbos will let out late enough that at least those of us who don't stay up that late won't have that opportunity. But so we're going to get started. This week's Parsha, as we just read, is Ki Tisa. There's a lot of great things in there. Lots that the rabbis here and around the world and of the Talmud talk about. I'm going to focus on something that I think we can sometimes overlook because of the repetition of it in our lives. So actually, I'm going to bring one of these out so that if people feel comfortable speaking into a microphone when they respond, there's a microphone out and about and we can pass it around. I'm just going to center it. But feel free to grab the mic if you feel comfortable doing so throughout the learning session. Is there some, for the sake of those on Zoom though, I'm gonna at least read the text. And although we normally I would just read it in English, I'm gonna read it in Hebrew because it will probably sound familiar. Actually, maybe I will even sing it. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat Ledorotam berit olam Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz Uvayom ha-shvi'i shavat va'inafash. So first of all, just a raise of hands. I'm curious, who realized that this is, as we say it like throughout Shabbos, who realized that this is actually sourced from Torah and not just like a part of our liturgy? Yeah. So like we say it constantly. It comes from Torah. Um, when do people think about this verse as we like sing it throughout Shabbat? Kiddush.
Yeah. Typically, good for Shabbat lunch.
Kiddush for Shabbat. Kiddush for Shabbat lunch. We say it at least one more time. It's in the Amidah. It's in the Shabbat Mariv. It's right. We say it right before the Amidah. It's like it has become a part of like right evening, Shabbos, like every single part of Shabbat. This text is the one that we turn to. Does anything stand out to you about, I'll read it in the English and then we'll go into it, but the Israelite people shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. It shall be a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day God ceased from work and was refreshed. Does anything stand out about this to anyone?
All time is mentioned twice.
All time is mentioned twice within it. So this is like, there's got to be something there. Why are we mentioning all time twice if all time should be pretty indicative of the fact that we're talking about forever? Why say forever twice, essentially? Other thoughts? Yeah, Joey?
What was for emphasis?
For emphasis, that's one way of doing it. And other thoughts about like what stands out about this passage? Yeah.
It's basically telling the Shabbat is trumpet there, is triumphant. That, this is the central part of it. 7 days I made the heavens and earth in Shabbat.
That Shabbat is like the center point of the week. Is that what you're? Yeah, that there's something here about like Shabbat as being the focal point of the week, not Sunday or Monday in our culture. Shabbat is what the week centers around. Yeah.
The word Vayigafash is what jumps out to me because I spend a whole lot of time teaching my 4th and 5th and 6th grade students when we read Breshit Parak Aleph, right? Was God tired? Did God need like a hammock and a lemonade and said, "Don't bother me for 24 hours"? No, right? But Vayishbo means ceased from working, not rested, and yet here next book of Bible we get
How much?
Vayigafash.
So Michael's bringing up this idea of Vayinafash that God was refreshed. How much reading ahead did you do? None?
None.
Okay, so that's one of the things that we're going to go into. But before we go into it, I just want to throw a question out there. Why do you think it is that this portion of Torah that talks about Shabbat is the one that we tend to refer to more than, like, there are other parts of other passages of Torah that mention Shabbat that do make its way into our liturgy, but this is the one that makes it again and again and again. Do you think there's any reason for that? And I'm not saying that I necessarily have an answer for this either. It's one of those things that stands out to me. Yeah.
In this commandment to observe the Shabbat, we have the story of creation in Shabbat as a reason why, and in the other place where we're commanded to observe the Shabbat, it talks about the Exodus, which doesn't necessarily have the neat relationship with this.
So this is one of those texts that talks about Shabbat and creation, which is really where Shabbat starts, right? But every other text, or at least most other texts that come to mind that talk about Shabbat and its relationship to Egypt. And it's a very different relationship for us to talk about Shabbat in the context of creation in its original context than Shabbat in the context of us as the Jewish people celebrating Shabbat post-Egypt. Yes.
In terms of relationship, right? It's also that if the creation story Shabbat is fundamentally about God, and then the Ten Commandments, Shabbat is about what we are supposed to do and not supposed to do, maybe as imitation of God. This is the text that talks about Shabbat as a sign of a relationship between God
So it's Shabbat as like a, as a, right, as a, actually, Ot Hi Leolam,
Yeah.
that it's Shabbat as a sign of the relationship between us and God, as opposed to Shabbat as a sign of our faithfulness to God, as we observe it with the mitzvot in the Aseret Dibrot and the Ten Commandments. Great. So great thoughts. I want to transition though into talking about Vayinafash, which is going to take us on a journey of Shabbat from beginning to end, and will eventually take us into, as the title alluded to, Havdalah, and hopefully take us ourselves into Ma'ariv and then Havdalah with a little bit more intention this week than we otherwise have on a week-to-week basis. So Sforno, who is a Spanish commentator in the, I want to say 13th century, 13th, 14th century, says on this word Vayinafash, this is why the seventh day is devoted to the nefesh, to the spirit, resulting in God giving Jews an additional soul for use on that day. This additional soul assists us in concentrating on the spiritual dimension of the day. When humankind was created, God made us in God's image, i.e., first and foremost concerned with spiritual concerns. The extra soul granted to us on the Sabbath is to help us live up to that vision that God had of man when God created us. And this commentary is referring to a text from Beitza that we're from the Talmud that we're going to look at in a second. But first, before we look at that original text, I want to just ask, according to Sforno, what like base level, why do we get an extra soul on Shabbat? Why is it that there's this understanding in Judaism that we have an extra soul that enters our body on Shabbat, only for Shabbat? Why, according to Sforno, do we get that extra soul?
Same tongue in cheek, but double portion.
A double portion. So that's one idea, but I don't know that that's
Yeah.
exactly what Sforno is getting at. What is his very simple understanding, at least, of this, which is not a simple thing at all, mind you. Connection. It's on that verge.
The extra soul assists us in our outlook on the day and our ability to connect in the spiritual way into God and Shabbat.
Great. Always great to have a ringer. Yeah, Shabbat, for those who don't know, Malachi is one of my colleagues at Ziegler, among many other things. Yes, it's this idea that that God has granted us a second soul, because Shabbat is supposed to be this spiritual experience, and our bodies on a day-to-day level can only engage in so much spirituality with one soul. So we need the second one to really engage with all the spirituality of Shabbat. That we can't do Shabbat properly if we were to do it with just one soul. We need both souls. And so what are we supposed to use our extra soul to do on Shabbat? And this isn't necessarily in the text, but as you think of like the spiritual concerns of Shabbat, what jumps to mind? Yeah.
You have to, in the body, if you really want to focus on God, you want that extra oomph that you get from that extra soul.
Right. So what are you doing with that extra umph of the extra soul on Shabbat? Trying to connect to, right. So maybe I'm not phrasing the question clearly enough. How are you trying to connect to God that is Shabbat specific? Yeah.
Well, God is making such an emphasis on keeping Shabbat, from the Ten Commandments to numerous mentions in the Torah. He wants, not only does he want to have a relationship with us and vice versa, but if we're created Tzelem Elohim, in the image of God, and God is deferring from his acts of malachot, of creative acts, then how do we do so by also deferring of our malachot, 39 malachot, and at the same time, that's just one aspect for the nefesh, but then learning Torah from like a neshama perspective, and then with being part of a community where it elevates our tefillah in a ritualistic and a sense of ruach.
Great. So there's all the things that we refrain from doing on Shabbat, which connects us to God. Just as God refrained from doing things on Shabbat, so too we refrain from it. And that's a spiritual dimension of Shabbat. You also mentioned prayer. Prayer is another one of those ways that we connect. And then I think you were kind of alluding to all of the things that we actively do on Shabbat as well, right? We have these wonderful meals, Suda Shlishit, but also like a Shabbos dinner with friends, and we sing, and we have some people have a tradition of saving the best food for Shabbat, that they go throughout the week every day picking one thing. Granted, dates back to the rabbis, and this was a practice in which people would go to the market on a daily basis because they didn't have supermarkets and they didn't have shelf-stable food. But they would go every single day to the market, and every day they would find one thing that they could keep for the week, that they could keep for Shabbos, so that every single day they were thinking about Shabbat. It was a spiritual practice for the day, but then it also made their Shabbos observance so much greater, because now you have at least 6 other things that have been specifically curated for a Shabbat meal, right? We have just the very act of getting together. On Shabbat, we have the rest. We have all of these different things that we actively do in addition to the things that we refrain from in order to make Shabbat this wonderful observance. So I kind of, I'll be honest, I forgot that there was a question on the next page, and I spoiled it for you, but I'm curious, like, how do you use, I threw a lot of ideas out there, but how do you in particular use your extra soul on Shabbat? What do you do that makes Shabbat special to you?
A lot of things. Change sheets. Just have, like you said, some special food or something like that.
Special food, yeah.
And about 4 or 5 other things I'm not remembering.
The things about Shabbat that we take for granted too. I know you're saying it as things that you're not remembering, but it is like those things of Shabbat that we can take for granted to a certain extent.
The restrictions that you have on Shabbat, are the restrictions that you're not working, there's things you're not doing, you're not working, you're not taking dishes, you're not doing these other things that which would separate it from the normal.
So all the things that you do that help to separate it by not doing those things.
Right. I was going to say one that's actually rabbinic is conducting business.
Taking a break from work and actually like.
I'm not spending money.
Yeah, not spending money. Sitting in Shabbat as this separate day. Yeah.
This comes from my wife's family. It's not mine, but the row of eye-level cereal in the supermarket when one is, say, under the age of 10 were referred to in my wife's family as Shabbat cereal, so that they didn't grow up thinking of Shabbat as a list of things that their other friends could do that they could not do, but the Fruit Loops Frosted Flakes section of the world, right? Cheerios 6 days a week, but Fruit Loops on the 7th day, and part of the extra soul therefore was that weirdly colored milk in your cereal.
Yeah, like having those foods that you only have on Shabbos. I know for me there are two Shabbos observances that come to mind. One of them is that I will have just straight out dessert for breakfast on Shabbos. Like, I'm not even pretending that sometimes it's donuts, but sometimes it's literally just brownies or cookies or something like that. Something that goes well with a good cup of coffee. That's yeah. it's well, I still can, at least I'm doing it. But one of the other things is that I have, and actually you can see it, this is a kippah that I only wear on Shabbat, and this is a talit that I only wear on, well, I should say Shabbat and Chagim. So it'll come out on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot and things like that, but this isn't something, these are two things that I only wear for those holidays, and not during the week, to make them special, to make it something that I look forward to and something that feels different for me in a very physical way as well. Yeah.
Same as you, with the talit, my wedding talit is the one I wear for Shabbat Chagim versus the one I had for my bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
The rest of the week is my watch, which I wear like an Apple Watch for the rest of the week.
Yeah, same.
But-
So a different watch as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also just this idea, like the Heschel would cite, an oasis in time. It's not just time, but also space and matter, right? It's like you treat your time differently. And I was telling my daughter this last night. It's like she was stressing out about next week already. I was like, Bella, like it's Shabbat now. Like we can just be present and not worry about the future and not worry about the past and just be present, right? And not worry about having to do anything with school or work and just like just be present in your space and not have to worry about changing things around, you know.
Yeah, just being present in time as well, right? One of the understandings of Shabbat is that I remember from when I was on a gap year in Israel, our program director reminded us whenever we were about to go on a trip, either immediately following Shabbat or like Sunday morning, was you need to be packed before Shabbat, because even though technically the actions that are involved in packing are not a prohibition of Shabbat, you are still involved in, you're breaking that feeling of Shabbat, and therefore it's prohibited in that way. The idea of like really being able to sit in Shabbat is important. So I want to, for the sake of time, transition into this text that Sforno is referring to, which comes to us from the Talmud in Tractate Beitza, as Rabbi Shimon ben, and this is where he's sourcing his idea from. As Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, the Holy One, blessed be God, gives a person an additional soul on Shabbat Eve, and at the conclusion of Shabbat removes it from him. As it is stated, God ceased from work and was refreshed, right? This is what we saw in Vishamru, Shavat Vayinafash. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Reish Lakish, expounds on this verse as follows. Since one ceased from work and now Shabbat has concluded and his additional soul is removed from him, woe, vai, for the additional soul, nephesh, that is lost. So this is where this idea comes from in Jewish thought. It may be sourced earlier, but this is like where it then starts finding its way into, among other things, Jewish ritual and Jewish law. So is anyone familiar with this idea of why we bless on spices for Havdalah? There's an idea that gets that we're going to dive into in a second, about why it is that the spices are a part of Havdalah, right? There's an idea so we need to say the last blessing of Havdalah to separate Shabbat from the rest of the week. We say the first blessing over wine because, among many other reasons, we say basically everything over wine that's ritual that is going to involve objects. There's an idea that we say one of multiple ideas as to why we use the candles is so that we look at it in our fingernails, and that reminds us, according to one midrash, of Adam Arishon, who was created in a kind of exoskeleton of fingernails. So it again it's a weird midrash. Maybe I'll bring it in some other day, but that reminds us of creation. But then there's this question of why spices, and candles are also like a very normal part of Jewish ritual as well, right? We go in with candles and we go out with candles. There are all these different ideas, but then spices are like this weird thing that we don't do as a part of really any other ritual. And so the Torah, which is one of the codes of Jewish law, says, and one blesses on the spices if one has them, and if one doesn't have them, one doesn't have to, which is an interesting aside that if you're doing Havdalah and you don't have spices, just move on. As the only reason we bless on them the spices is to return the soul which is in pain from the departure of Shabbat. So what is this text getting at? Why are we using the spices at the end of Shabbat? Compensation. There's this idea that is really interesting, that our soul doesn't want to leave our body. Our neshama yetera, our extra soul, doesn't want to leave our body at the end of Shabbat. It's found its home. It's not ready to go 6 days being separated from us. And so we have to literally like drag it out. And the only way to drag it out is with something pleasant, like the smell of spices. And that is what can separate our extra soul from us on Shabbat, so that we can go into the week as God intended us to go into the week, with one soul, ready to go through the week and come back next Shabbos, having that soul enter into us and enjoy Shabbos once again. So as we're start to wrap up, I want to bless us all that first of all, that we are able to sit in appreciation of our extra soul next Shabbos, that we are able to part with it maybe a little bit easier this Shabbos, knowing it's coming back, and that those spices that really bring our soul out of us also enliven us for the week to come. So with that in mind, we're going to transition into Birkat Hamazon. Is there someone who is willing to lead? Joey, are you okay to do that? I had absolutely nothing to eat, so I should not be the one leading.
Yeah, I had bread, so I can lead it.
Great. I'm going to give you a microphone.
So we good. The ones in hear me.
Page 47 in your little books here. Shir Hamalot B'Shuv Adonai Et Shivat Zion Hayinu Kecholomim Az Yemalei Sechok Pinu Ulshonenu Rina Az Yemiru Vagoim Higdil Adonai Lasoti Mele Higdil Adonai Lasoti Manu Hayinu Semechim Shuv Adonai Et Shavitenu Ka'afikim ba'negev hazorim bedima berina yiksoru halachelechu vacho nosei meshech hazara bo yavo verina nosei alumotav tehilat Adonai yedaber pi Yivarech kol basar shimko shel ba'ed va'anachnu nivarech yah me'ata v'yad olam hallelujah hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasto mi emalel gevurot Adonai yashmiach kol teilato Chavirai nevarech
Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach me'ata v'yad olam.
Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach me'ata v'yad olam birshut chavirai Nevrech Eloheinu shechalnu mishalo. Baruch Eloheinu shechalnu mishalo tuvo chayinu. Baruch hu baruch shemo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Hazan et haolam kulo betuvo bechein bechesed u'rachamim. Hu noten lechem lechol basar ki le'olam chaso. Uvtuvo hagadol. Tamid l'chasar lanu ve'echsar lanu mazon l'olam ba'ed bavur shemo hagadol yodan parnes lakol umetiv lakol umechin mazon l'chol beriotav asher bara baruch atah Adonai hazan et hakol nadel. Yeah.
Did you want?
Or so we have a few.
Yeah, does someone want to lead Mari? You're welcome to if you want. All right.
When mentally I keep forgetting.
Not really.
Okay.
We're going to begin or continue with Mari to end Shabbat, which can be found on page 264.
Urachu michaper b'vol yashkit ba shiva puvla yer kol chamato Adonai hamalchani v'yom korinu Baruchu et Adonai hamivorach Baruch Adonai hamivorach l'olam va'ed Baruch et Adonai hamivorach. Ma'avir b'yom vein laila mabdil b'yom vein laila Adonai tzva'o shema chayv kayam tamin machalin l'olam va'ed Baruch et Adonai hamari v'arvim avat l'olam b'Yisrael mechav. Vatachal tasir mimenu li'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Le'ivamo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. That's Adonai. Yeah, I'm smart. These. Adonai Elohechem emet v'emunachol zivkam. Malchuto b'ratzon kibilu alehem Moshe Miriam uvnei Israel chanu shirab simcha rabav yameru chulam micha mocha bailim Adonai mikamocha nadar bakodesh notilot osefele מלכותך רעובה, נחבוק ים לפני משה, זה אלי אנו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כיפדה אדוני את יעקב, גאל מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל, אשיבין אדוני אלוהינו לשלום ואמיתים. ושמור תיתנו ואין חיים ושלום מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני, שומר עמו ישראל לעד, ברוך אדוני לעולם אמן ואמן, ברוך אדוני. Baruch Adonai. כי המלכות שלך היא לעולמי תימוך בכבוד, כי לנו מלך אלא אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלך עלינו לעולם ועד ועל כל מעשיו. יתגדל ויקדש שמך רבה, ויעלמה דברכיותך וימליך מלכותך, בחייכם וימיכם ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בעגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמך רבה מברך לעולם לעולמי עולמיה. יתברך וישבח ויפאר ויתרום ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמך תקודשה בריחו לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
If you're still attending your private audio, please continue. Otherwise, please join us on page 279 for Khatsi College.
Ikadavi Kadash Mehraba, Bialamadi Verakute, Viamichmachute, Vechayechon of Yamechon of Chaydachol Israel, Baglavis Mankari Vimru, Amen, Shemechrabam Varach, Lam Lalamelamaya, Eat Barach, Bishabak, Parvi Krambina, Savit Hadarvi Televi Halal, Shemechkud Shaberichu, Leilamin Kolbrechata Vishirata, Tishbechata Nechamata, Amiram Bealamavim, Ru, Amen. You know how to Anywho, she still him. Ukraine benehu imo anuchi b'tarach achalati v'chabedehu urechami masbihu v'yarihu b'shuati urechami masbihu v'yarihu b'shuati 216 red arrow v'ata kadosh yoshev til Israel v'karazel zev yamar kadosh 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 anay tvelet machar tzkivodo Vatisain yirach veshma acharei korash gadol baruch kavodo Adonai mimakomo so I need to shmit Adonai umlech v'lam va'ed Adonai Vayivtichu v'chayoda Esha Mecha Kilo Zav Tador Shecha Adonai Adonai Chafetz Lamantziko Yagdil Torah Yadir 280 Kaddish Shalem Ikadal v'kadash shemech rabah Be'alemadi v'rakir teh v'yamich machu teh B'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayedechol v'Yisrael B'agalav izman karivimru Amen Yehi shemech rabah mibarach Le'alam l'alem e'alemaya Yitbarach v'ishtabach V'par v'tram v'tnaseh v'tadar v'taleh v'talal Shemech t'kud shah berichu Le'lam min kol b'chatav v'shirata Tishbachatav nechamata da amiran be'alem avimru Amen Tikabal Soto vote to Hon to Israel, Kodama Vahon Divishmaya Vimru, Amen. Heshalam Arabamin Shmayav Chaim, Alima Kol Israel Vimru, Amen. O Sesh Shalom Bimromav, Huya Sesh Shalom, Alin Val Kol Israel Vimru, Amen. Alin Shabbat Adon, Hakol Tikul Israel. Okay, no Kaveh. Oh, I have my hair on Kakatu v'toratecha Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol ha'aretz bayom hahu yiyeh Adonai echad u'shmo echad. Mourners Kaddish 282. Eat gadal v'eat kadash shemech rabah Be'alemad yiverak kiruteh be'amlich malchuteh Bechayechon uviomechon ubchaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala ubizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi shemech rabam mevarach le'alam le'alam elamaya. V'it barach v'it tabach v'it pa'ar v'it romam v'it naseh v'it hadar v'it aleh v'it halal shemech kudsha berichu le'ela min kol birchata b'shirata tushbechata menachamata da'amiran be'alema v'imru Amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shmaya b'chaim malenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Conclude as we have for the last 141-ish days with Hatikva, which is found on page
48.
448.
448 at the bottom. Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homia ulfate mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia od lo aveda tikvatenu Hatikva bachanot alpayim lihiotam chofshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion birushalayim lihiotam chofshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion birushalayim.
We are in a wonderful predicament in which Joey so efficiently led us through Ma'ariv, and we have actually a couple minutes before we can actually say Havdalah. So I'm going to turn stuff around, and
I believe it's 6:27.
I had 6:23 on
Oh, weird, because that was 42 minutes after sundown. Sundown was 5.
I hold my rabbi seat.
Okay.
I believe our if it wasn't our newsletter, it was the Jewish Journal, said 6:23, so we have a couple more minutes. So we'll hold on to Shabbos for one more minute by singing in our Kol Echad, one of the songs that we brought Shabbos in with, and that should probably bring us to the time to say Havdalah. Yedid Nefesh is found on page 45. It's also in our Sidurim. I just don't know what the page is of. Page 10. This is what happens when you have multiple prayer leaders. Yedid Nefesh HaRachaman Neshach Avdach Eretzona Yarutz Avdach Kinmoaya Yishachaveh Muhadara Yerabo Yedidutach Minofetzu Vechol Ta'am Hadurna Ziv Ha'olam Nafshi Cholat Ahavata Ana Emna Rifana La Beharot La Noam Ziva Atin Chazek V'titrapek V'haytalach Shicha Berkat Olam Vatikemu Rachamecha Husna Albeno Hava Ki ze kama Niksok Liro Tiferet Uza Anaeli
Machmali bi Kushana
Ve'alti talam Igalena Ufros chaviv alai Et sukat shelomach Ta'ireret mikvodach Nagila V'nismecha ba Maherahu Kiva Moed Vechoneni Kimeolam. As we entered Shabbat yearning for God and for God's presence, we leave Shabbat yearning to hold on to God's presence, yearning to hold on to our Neshama Yetera, and yet we will continue with Havdalah and hold that Neshama Yetera out, ready to enter into the week and to yearn for Shabbat once again. Can someone hit the lights?
There we go.
Hine el Yeshuati Yetach v'lo echad Ki ozi v'zimrat yam Adonai vayhi li Yeshua Ushaptem mayim b'sason Mimaynei ha-Yeshua L'Adonai ha-Yeshua
Alam chadir chatecha sela Adonai Tzivaot Imanu Mizgav lanu Elohei Yaakov Sela Adonai Tzivaot Ashrei Adam Boteach Bach Adonai Hoshia Hamelech Yaneinu V'yom Koreinu La Yehudim Hayta Ora V'simcha v'sason Ikar Ken Tielanu Kos Yeshuot Esa Uv'shem Adonai Ekra Ay nay 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 ay nay 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 Tzavri Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei Peri Hagafen Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei Minei V'samim Nay 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 Ya nay 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 ya nay 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei marei haish Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lecho ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael le'amin ben yom hashvi l'sheshet yemei hamaseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lecho Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimheira V'yameinu, Yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David. Shavua Tov, everyone. Morning Minyan tomorrow is at 8 a.m. Please be here. Shabbat Shalom to y'all on Zoom as well who stayed on. Shabbat Shalom, Taibo. Shabbat Shalom, Siegel family. Or Shavua Tov. Wow. That Neshama Yatera really didn't want to come out, did it? Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov, everyone.
Okay, I'll go. Oh, we're here.
Hello, Shavua Tov, Marlise and Gary. Marlise, I saw you had the honor.
What's that?
I saw you had an honor.
Yeah, I was able to do the Leela and.
You all right?
Yep.
That would be wonderful.
And now it looks as if Ben Siegel has family that wants to say something to him too.
Oh, is that what they went on?
Well, same last name, same spelling.
Sorry's there.
Oh, there she is.
There she is.
Ah, did he see?
Tells me when sunset is. And the guy before you miss what sunset was, that's how I got to 27.
Actually, you know what?
Well, anyway, you can tell. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
You have a good week.
Shavua Tov. See you in various classes and things.
Yeah.
I take the USC.
That's pretty.
Yeah.
That's in one of the benches.
I
Yeah.
know. I'll steal that. I'll steal that one.
Hmm?
That's fine. Everybody's
Yeah,
gone.
just that type one up.
Yeah, you just add
3 stars at minutes.
That was a good rush.
Yeah, well, 3 stars, but who making that is.
Yeah. Do you need a ride or are you good?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm good.
What?
What's up?
What up?
You know,
Tell me.
I'll
I'll good. I will.
But I end up thinking I'm like happy because that's
Oh, yeah.
right? I'm like, you're sort of a natural part of that day. So it's just like a nice, yeah, it's like
Alana and I have.
you are forever associated with good memories.
Nice.
He was
Absolutely.
born on Shabbos. He is the proof among proof for me that the Shabbat and Caleb exists because our Shabbos baby behaves so differently on Shabbos than any other day. He's so much calmer. He sleeps better. Eats better. Like every he's happier. Yes.
Skips a few.
Yes. I mean, the rest of the week then is not that necessarily, but the joys. So, so I will send. I have 2 TV ALA emails to send. I have another one that I need to get in touch with Rabbi Jordan on something completely different. So I will also send the email.
Wait, hold on 1 second. I'm going to do something so utterly child serving.
I was gonna say, you want, you don't have to.
Thank you for saying I'm going to have to go over Rabbi Jordan because now I can remember a novel out of all the problems. I feel good and it doesn't feel like it's safe. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know what happens to this whole control. Right. So I don't feel like I'm cheating.
I don't know. I know when there's other stuff left over, it disappears.
Yeah.
But can't imagine.
All it took. Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov. I should always go to shul.
these?
No lectures, no nothing. No, because this doesn't does it comes out. When I got something, that's my kimchi. So what did she hit with it? No push-ups in the house. Push-up. What? What group? What group? Yes. It's okay. It's almost done. It's okay. It will be blue tomorrow, and you'll, a week or two it will go away. The next time, try to be more careful. Then she'll break the wrist, and then you'll have a real mess. Use the head this time.
She used her head.
Well, you have to do it.
Yeah, but we couldn't find any. We went with infants. I didn't know how.
So the place was full today.
Yeah, right? Except for the rabbit.
It was good, except that it's minus on the road. And I have an objection. Hey, come here. I have an objection to him. It says Rabotai Nevarech at the end of the meal. Right?
She got her hand caught. She got her hand.
Careful, careful, careful.
So what's the problem with it?
You want to put your hands in the water?
You don't know what the problem is.
Hands in the water. Okay, okay, okay.
How do you say chaver in English?
Yes, Mama says,
How do you say chaver in Russian?
okay, I gotcha, I gotcha.
How do you say chaver in Russian?
Okay.
Have you ever
Breathe.
Have you ever heard the word, hey, me, have you ever heard the word comrade? What's comrade?
You're awake, it's getting better. Is it cold? Is the water cold? Yes?
Bend it a little bit. Bend the bottle a little bit. Okay. What's going on with the, is she getting chills?
No, I'm shaking my leg. Called distraction. Hello, how are you?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So how do you say chaver in Russian? And what's
That's
comrade
really
mean?
something.
What does comrade mean? Comrade means friend.
My name?
Yeah.
Daniel.
Chaver.
It's right in calling me Lily.
How do you say friend in Russian?
Friend? I don't know. I don't speak Russian.
We used to go to Mount Scopus on like
What's comrade?
Tuesday or
What is comrade?
with Rabbi Ram. He has a
I can
little
look it
tin
up.
car. We used to all go up the
Comrade?
hill.
I can look it up. Hold on. Let's see. Translate. Friend. To Russian.
Look, Google, too, Patty.
Oh dear. I can't even say that.
What?
Can you read that?
It's not translated.
This is.
Oh, comrade.
Oh, what's that?
No, it says
Drew.
delta.
Drew.
True.
Do your.
What's comrade? That's what comrade means.
Comrade. The word comrade.
Yeah. I didn't hear it.
That play of sound and music was very impressive.
Товарищество.
I'm sorry you couldn't go see it.
Again.
That was very weird. That's your.
Oh, C-O-M.
Your
Like
Google.
C-O-M. But the Tavarish is close.
His
Very-
daughter was in this sound and music. You know Russian? No. He's just doing Google Translate like we all do. You don't know what. Telling us to
Comrade.
Товарищ.
Comrade means favorite?
Товарищ is comrade in Russian.
Yeah, but Tavarish is Russian.
Yeah.
And what is comrade?
From Russian to English?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you wanted me to translate it to
I
Russian.
didn't translate.
I can't spell in Russian.
It just,
Sitting down.
I can send you enough to be able to
I don't
read the
think
Russian.
No,
It's really
I-
difficult.
Comrade. I don't know.
What does it say? It's what? What's it in English?
Comrade. The English word is comrade, but I don't know what you.
You know what she said? She said I'm a gentleman versus a friend.
Comrade is what first of all, it's a communist lingo.
I understand that, but I don't know the word.
And my understanding, it means a friend. Or that's what you address people in Russian.
So, friend.
You got over.
Is it Tоварищ?
Right?
No, sorry, not Tоварищ. Drew.
Good. So what's Tavarish in English?
Comrade. So, that's what I got, when I put in comrade, it's Tоварищ.
Okay. From Hebrew to Russian, friend.
Okay, let's try that.
Chaver. And comrade to Hebrew.
It sounds like a monkey's in the zoo.
Also, combiner.
Comrade Hebrew, yeah, חבר, okay.
I wrote חבר in Hebrew, give me clue.
Well, yeah, but, here, in Hebrew, it says חבר, חבורה, קבוצה, חבר, okay?
Yeah,
So comrade is
but none of these say comrade.
not in Hebrew.
I'm saying I put in Hebrew חבר, and it's giving me through, and it's giving me all these other words in Russian that are not
Those are in
comrade.
Hebrew, those are in Hebrew.
No, these are the white words, the words in Russian.
Right?
Compagner? I don't know.
After instruction works really well.
Okay,
Com-
you have enough of
Compagner,
well, it's very important because,
I couldn't go.
because they changed the Rabotai Nevarech to Chaverai Nevarech in the new one.
Yeah, because people don't feel like they are, that's formality. Rabotai indicates that it's more of a master, gentleman. Chaverai is more general, more equal.
Chaverai is Russian.
Yeah.
Says to another Russian.
Understood.
Russian.
That makes sense.
So
That's what they say in, also in kibbutz, they say chaverai. Right?
By saying you're more inclusive, by saying Rabotai, it separates you from all the people that would say Rabotai. Then it's like two different things.
I mean,
versus like being
Chabad
inclusive
says in
is
Yiddish,
one
you know,
thing.
Rabbi Sai Nivel invention, that sets them apart from everyone else. Like, I don't understand what the problem is. Like, you know, what kind of language you want to use, I suppose. Take care.
Okay, very good. So, communism is actually, communism is actually.
I don't like Rabotai. I don't want that guy calling me a friend. I'm not his friend. He's my rabbi or whatever. He's not my friend. I don't need to say Rabotai. Hello, I'm not your friend. I wasn't the one. He was the one who mentioned it.
I'm upset about it because communism is entering society in so many ways, in so many levels, without us appreciating it.
Okay, well, I'm telling you where it's coming from. You can believe it, I don't believe it. Please stop. Please stop with the stick. Please stop with the stick. Child. Please stop with the slide. We're done. Please stop. Does it smell good? Smells good. Okay, let's go. Let's bust in the locker. Popcorn? He's trying to clean up. Minha leaves so he can clean up.
It's okay.
We're in here, boy.